Jealous, are you?
Jealous? Oh, come on, Sandy. Don't make me laugh. Ha, ha, ha.
And what have you ever done?
That summer you just had might have been the best of your life. But now reality is calling you away. And it doesn't seem fair at all. Kind of like when you think you know everything about Grease, only to discover that the movie hides far juicier, stranger, and more surprising behind-the-scenes stories than you ever imagined. It's not just about Danny and Sandy's sweet summer romance with the T-Birds and Pink Lady strutting around in perfect 1950 style. There's drama, odd casting choices, power, moves by big-name stars, and bizarre little accidents that somehow made it to the final cut. So let's dig in, because once you hear these 10 facts, plus a bonus, you'll never look at this beloved musical the same way again, and trust me, when we get to number 10, you'll be shaking your head wondering how certain things ever slip past the censors. So, picture this. Fact number 1 is all about John Travolta flexing his star power when it came to the famous dance-off scene. The original script actually had Cha-Cha winning the trophy on her own, which would have been a fun little twist. But Travolta decided that wasn't right for Danny Zuko, arguing that his character needed that victory to match the energy of a heroic leading man. So he lobbied to change the ending of the contest, and sure enough, behind-the-scenes footage even shows director and producers hashing it out before ultimately siding with him, which transformed the moment into one of the film's most memorable triumphs. But that wasn't the only thing he insisted on. He was notoriously particular about his hair, to the point that it became a headache for the makeup department, showing that sometimes on-set challenges aren't just about getting the perfect shot. They're about keeping the star happy. Moving on to fact 2, you might think of Rizzo as the ultimate tough yet cool high schooler, but here's the twist. Stockard Channing, who played her, was actually 33 years old at the time, and she wasn't even the oldest teen in the cast, because many of the so-called high schoolers were actually in their late 20s and early 30s. Why? According to the director, casting older actors gave the characters more edge and experience. And this wasn't unusual for Hollywood at the time, especially in musicals, though it did mean that they had to use makeup tricks, strategic lighting, and carefully chosen wardrobe to help sell the illusion of youth. Fact 3 takes us into the territory of on-set tension. Ever wonder about Grease Lightning? That iconic number full of swagger and innuendo? Well, in the stage version, it was Kenicki's song, but Travolta pushed to make it Danny's, and the studio caved, which reportedly left Jeff Conaway, who played Kenickie, feeling overshadowed and resentful. The bad vibes were only compounded when Conaway suffered back injury during filming that scene after being accidentally dropped by a dancer, an injury that would cause him problems for years. Almost like bad karma for having his big moment taken away. Then there's fact 4, that famously strange ending where Danny and Sandy fly off in a car into clouds. Turns out, the filmmakers never intended for there to be an explanation. It was meant as a dreamy, surreal flourish. But over the years, fans have spun wild theories, including the now famous one that Sandy died at the beginning, and the whole film is her fantasy, though the truth is far less spooky. The creative team just thought it looked cool, no metaphor intended. Fact 5 is about something far cheekier. The cast had their own unofficial, very raunchy alternate version of the script that they'd toss around between takes purely to entertain each other, with lines so inappropriate that the director flat out banned them from being mentioned in interviews. Olivia Newton-John even joked later that she had to unlearn some of Rizzo's improvised dirty lines, and some of these naughty exchanges reportedly ended up preserved on rare behind-the-scenes tapes. A reminder that the fun atmosphere on set was sometimes just as outrageous as what made it onto the screen. Fact 6 moves us to a wardrobe nightmare. Those legendary black leather pants Sandy wears in the final scene were actual vintage pieces from the 1950s and had no zipper, meaning Olivia Newton-John had to be literally sewn into them each morning, and if nature called, it was a 30-minute ordeal to get her out and back in. Yet she endured the discomfort for the sake of that unforgettable transformation moment. The pants later sold at auction for a staggering sum, cementing their place as one of cinema's most famous costumes, though Olivia herself laughingly called them her sweatiest memory of making the movie. Fact 7 dives into some off-screen romantic awkwardness. Jeff Conaway apparently had a huge crush on Olivia Newton-John during filming, to the point where he'd forget his lines around her and even ask producers if his character could end up with Sandy instead, which obviously didn't happen. But the story gets even stranger. when you learn that years later he actually married Olivia's sister, turning that crush into an odd little piece of Hollywood trivia. Fact 8 brings us into the grueling filming of the big dance scene, which took place in a gymnasium during the summer with no air conditioning. Temperatures soared past 100 degrees. People fainted, makeup melted, and crew members had to rotate performers in and out to cool down. Yet they pushed through, giving us one of the most visually dazzling sequences in movie musical history. And if you look closely, you can actually spot sweat marks on some of the dancers, though most viewers never notice because the energy of the scene is so infectious. Fact 9 is about an accident that became a signature moment. During the beauty school dropout number, Frenchie's bubblegum pink hair wasn't planned at all. The wig had simply arrived from the supplier in the wrong color, but the director loved the unexpected look so much that they kept it, and fans now consider it one of the character's defining features, proving that sometimes the best creative choices happen by mistake. And finally, Fact 10 reveals at the time of filming, nobody, not the cast, not the crew, not even the studio, had any idea Grease would go on to become a global cultural juggernaut. At the wrap party, some thought the movie would be forgotten within a year, and Olivia Newton-John even considered stepping away from acting after it ended. But instead, the film exploded. The soundtrack sold more than 30 million copies worldwide, and decades later it remains one of the most beloved musicals ever made, referenced endlessly in pop culture as proof that lightning really can strike. And because you stuck around, here's your bonus fact. Early in production, the movie was almost titled Grease Lightning after the show-stopping car number, and promotion materials even used that working title. But producers eventually decided that Grease better capture the full scope of the high school teen culture vibe they wanted, with a short, punchy name that was easy to remember and brand. And maybe that decision helped seal the film's iconic status, because while Grease Lightning, the musical, might have been memorable, it's hard to imagine having quite the same timeless snap. So from power struggles over dance-offs to unplanned fashion moments, from off-screen crushes to sizzling on-set temperatures, the real story of Grease is filled with as much drama, humor, and unexpected turns as anything in the script, making it a richer, stranger, and far more human tale than the sunny romance we see on screen. And next time you hear that opening guitar riff or picture Danny and Sandy riding off into the clouds, you'll remember that the magic of this movie didn't just come from catchy songs and big hair. It came from a mix of calculated choices, happy accidents, and a cast and crew who poured themselves into making something they thought might be forgotten, only for it to become one of the most enduring cinematic love letters to summer romance ever filmed. And here's the thing. When you really think about it, Grease isn't just a movie about high school love and flashy cars. It's a snapshot of how 1970s Hollywood romanticized the 1950s, blending the myth of simpler times with a sly undercurrent of rebellion, which means that behind every fact about the film's making, there's a deeper layer about how movies shape memory. Take Travolta's dance-off victory. It's not just ego. It's about giving audiences a fantasy version of the 1950s where the cool guy always comes out on top, the kind of wish fulfillment ending that real life often denies. In reality, school dances were messy, awkward affairs, but Grease transforms it into a choreographed dreamscape, and Travolta knew instinctively that winning would make Danny feel like a true cinematic hero, the kind you root for even if he's a little cocky. That same instinct is why he obsessed over his hair. Not merely vanity, but a commitment to embodying a character so perfectly that no strand was out of place. Because to a greaser, hair was more than style. It was identity, armor, and status, and one wrong curl could send the whole crumbling. Makeup crews, armed with combs, sprays, and even emergency jars of pomade, learned to work at lightning speed to reset his look between takes, often under the watchful eye of the star himself. And then there's the strange magic of older actors convincingly playing teens, a practice that can feel jarring today, but in Grease adds an almost theatrical surrealism, a reminder that we're not watching reality but a heightened version of it. Channing's Rizzo feels lived in, full of sarcasm and street smarts that a real high schooler might not have mastered. And the choice to cast older performers meant the movie could handle more suggestive humor without crossing censorship lines for child actors. The de-aging tricks were clever. Lighting rigs designed to soften every shadow, makeup palettes adjusted to mimic the blush of youth, and costume cuts that avoided revealing the real proportions of adult bodies, letting the illusion hold even in close-ups. The Grease lightning switch from Kennedy to Danny says a lot about adaptation politics. On stage, the number was a psychic's chance to shine, full of cheeky innuendo and swagger. But on film, marketing priorities demanded that the biggest star get the song that would live on in radio play and soundtrack sales. For Conaway, losing that moment was more than just a missed scene. It was a professional setback, especially since he'd poured himself into rehearsals only to be sidelined. The tension it caused wasn't just personal. It was emblematic of how the film industry often reallocates glory for the sake of box office appeal. The ending, with that surreal flying car, might have been just for fun, according to the filmmakers, but there's a reason audiences can't stop theorizing about it. Sometimes a whimsical visual resonates more deeply than the creator intended, and the imagery of leaving the ground, defying gravity, and soaring into clouds is an almost universal metaphor for escaping the ordinary. The practical effect itself was a tricky undertaking, involving cranes, wires, and camera tricks that had to align perfectly to create the illusion of effortless liftoff. And the fact that it closes the movie leaves a lingering sense of magic that outlasts the credits. Then there's that raunchy alternate script, which reveals another truth about ensemble filmmaking. Camaraderie is often built not just through shared work, but through private humor, and in this case, those joke-laden dirty takes helped the cast bond through long, repetitive days. The creative energy behind them was proof that the actors understood their characters deeply enough to riff on them endlessly, even if the results were far too explicit for the family-friendly final cut. Newton John's quip about unlearning Rizzo's lines hints at just how memorably wild some of those improvised exchanges must have been. Olivia Newton-John's leather pants saga is a testament to the lengths actors will go for the sake of an iconic image. These weren't just tight pants. They were almost unyielding. Their vintage leather hardened over decades, and being sewn it meant she had to time her water intake and breaks with precision. Crew members reportedly had a whole routine to get her in and out, like a pit crew at a race, and the heat of the set turned those pants into a sweltering challenge. Yet in the finished film, all you see is a transformed Sandy radiating confidence, which is why those pants later sold for an astonishing sum at auction, becoming as famous as any line of dialogue. Conaway's crush adds another layer of human drama. His admiration for Newton-John wasn't just a passing fancy. It was a genuine infatuation that made certain scenes hard to film, and while it stayed professional, the knowledge that he later married her sister gives the whole story a curious sense of destiny, as though life was determined to tie their fates together in unexpected ways. Hollywood is full of these strange interpersonal loops, but few are as neatly circular as this one. The heat during the dance scene filming wasn't just uncomfortable, it was dangerous. Performers had to rotate in and out not just to rest, but to avoid heat stroke, and the gym became a kind of endurance arena where only the toughest could keep going without fainting. The miracle is that the energy never dropped on camera. Every spin, every jump, every laugh looks as fresh as if it were the first take, even though some shots came hours into the grueling schedule. Frenchie's pink hair accident is a reminder that some of the most memorable movie visuals come from pure chance. If the wig had arrived in the intended color, that quirky splash of pastel wouldn't exist, and Frenchie might have blended in more with the rest of the cast. Instead, she stands out, a visual cue for her character's experimental spirit and willingness to embrace the unconventional, and audiences responded to that spark. And the fact that no one expected Grease to become a cultural phenomenon only makes its success sweeter. It wasn't hyped to the heavens before release, which allowed audiences to discover organically, spreading enthusiasm through word of mouth until it snowballed into a global hit. The soundtrack success was equally surprising, becoming a staple in households and car radios, and ensuring that even people who hadn't seen the movie knew its songs by heart. Finally, the title change from Grease Lightning to Grease was more than just a marketing decision. It was a stroke of branding genius, distilling the film's identity into a single, snappy word that carried both literal and cultural meaning. Grease was about hair, cars, and a certain slick coolness, but also hinted at the film's slightly naughty edge, something that Grease Lightning, as a title, might have narrowed into a purely car-centric story. By choosing the broader term, the producers gave the movie room to be about school, romance, rebellion, and style all at once, helping it become the multi-generational touchstone it is today.